Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Big Charles' YouTube channel. This is going to be a little review of what the meta has been like over the course of the latter half of 2024. I believe it was around July that we got some tactics card updates and rotations, and then the other meta change that we had was the small changes right before WTC in around October time. So this has basically been a pretty standard meta and what we've been looking at over the last 6 months. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down a top 10 and I'm going to talk about what those lists are. I've spoken to some of the leaders in affiliation, some of the best players of each affiliation, and pick their brains to see what's good and what are the best players doing at the moment. As much as I like to tell myself I'm amazing at the game, in reality there's lots of people that are better than me. So these are going to be a lot of their thoughts translated through. As a little game, if you fancy, pause the video and write down what you think the top 10 list of leaders is, or just your top three. Let me know, and then we can have a little compare, see if you guess properly on the stats. But I imagine there's going to be a few things that a lot of people didn't see coming. So starting off our top 10, jumping right into it, is going to be Apocalypse. Now, Apocalypse is a fascinating leader. Originally, when he came out, I think a lot of people were assuming that he'd be a big attrition piece, where I think the reality is actually that he is reliant very much on his condition game and on the mobility of the people in his affiliation. That mobility really lends itself to pay to flip game and to a good B/D map plan. These are all thoughts coming straight from Robble Browser, who was a lovely guy. He gave me a lot of his thoughts on Apocalypse, and he actually went 5-1 at the WTC and has been having some great success. So I believe he also was on the Danger Room recently. I'll link any talks that these guys have had. I'll link any talks of those in the description so you can hear them on podcasts and such. So just diving into what this looks like, we've got a lot of characters with places, and the power of famine and pestilence is really what sort of carries Apocalypse. Their biggest struggle is going into high attrition lists, some of the turbo attrition lists, which I'm sure we'll get into later on in this list. Um, their worst win rate, I think Rob Rouse was right, but their worst win rate off of Longshanks was 37% against Asgard, which is pretty atrocious. Um, but really, really interesting to hear his thoughts. Moving on, number 9, looking at the Spider Boys. I took this list from Johnny Pastrami, who's one of the top 5 web players on Longshanks, and he has a bit of an unconventional list. The main strength of webs is going super wide, having really efficient and impactful three threats like Miles Morales, Spectacular Spider-Man, Black Cat, and then even somebody like Proxima Midnight or Lizard, of really good tanky pieces to play that same game where you're going to be moving people off of objectives and using Ghost Spider as well for that same reason. Um, Normal sort of web stuff, 55% web win rate. It's a turbo team, fast scoring out the gate. They've got that wide mobile plan with some defensive tech with their rerolls built in, things like Spider Tracker. But they struggle into high attrition teams with a lot of chase. Um, and according to Johnny, they also struggle into Hellfire Club. And now I think if you talk to Hellfire players, they say that they struggle against webs, and if you talk to webs, they say they struggle against Hellfire. So I think that because it's just a very much a chess game when those two affiliations are playing. That's why my personal favourite Convocation is their worst matchup on webs at 36%, which is also pretty atrocious, just having that chase and that high volume of mystic attacks. Number 8, this was taken from Mr. Nitro Zeus, the TTS League Season 15 winner. He did very, very well to go undefeated for such a long run of games, really bringing some tech that sort of we didn't see coming, where he's relying very much on Namor and Red Skull under Mbaku's leadership. If you haven't watched some of his games, I really recommend going like checking out Lucas Sheik's channel. He got some really good capture of Zach in action. Again, lovely guy, gave me massive insight into his list. And he said their strength is in being really consistent and flexible with their dice. Red Skull has some of the most consistent dice. Mbaku's dice fixing is really important. But he also expressed that the majority of the strength of this affiliation at the moment is in their tactics cards. It is in the big swing turns with Wakanda Forever, with Wisdom of the Ancients, really allowing them to impact the game early on. So if you're looking to dive in, bring that core of M'Baku, T'Challa, but then just bring other supporting characters that are going to work well when you want that big swing. They say they like midline play. They say they dislike B and F spread maps. Um, Although their worst matchup is Shield, and I imagine that that's one where just the sheer volume of little dice that Shield are bringing um, swing that matchup. Number 7, Sam Vengers. Let me know, guys, if you're keeping up, if you've got the correct 10 so far, if you saw these coming. Sam Vengers um, was a surprising one for me. 57% win rate, doing very well in the moment for that really strong mid-range game, having that balance of defensive and attrition tech. You've got things like Namor and Thor, very powerful pieces, but you're also leaning on things like Sam, Iron Man, and Luke Cage was what Merzane said that his top 5, what his core 3 were. He'd bring Iron Man, he'd bring Luke Cage, and he'd bring Sam basically every game. Their worst matchup is Webb's with 35%. So Webb's just able to play that sort of like scoundrels game plan, the high threat better. Sam loves some low threat games where his core can be really, really impactful. Moving on, Storm X-Men doing the turbo thing really efficiently, placing them at number 6. So they're going to come out the gate hard, swinging hard. And this was a list taken from Joe Manji, who seems to kick my ass every time we play. He's running a really interesting Dracula and Namor as his 9th and 10th slots, but I figure the core of his list is in those sort of first 8 characters. You're running Beast for the safe grab, you're running Domino, X-23, and Storm. And just being able to try and score out within 2 or 3 turns. Joe was saying they struggle into Xavier Dream counters, things like Midnight Suns or Surprise Webhead from Spider Foes, or even opposing Namor, enemy Namor, can be really difficult for Storm X-Men. Next up we have Red Skull 3 Cabal, which I'm sure a lot of people were expecting would be a little bit higher up on this list, and I definitely was as well. It feels like one of the most oppressive lists at the moment. I took this list from a good friend of mine, Mr. Tom, who went 6-0 at the WTC, one of the better, or luckier arguably, but one of the better Thanos Red Skull players that's out there at the moment. And I think we all know what this list is doing. It's got really high quality dice, and it's able to put its models and its damage into the exact places it needs to basically every time. But it's just interesting to see that its win rate was so much lower. But I do think that this is one of those polarizing ones where some of the best players will have an incredibly high win rate, and potentially some of the people that are a little bit lower down or less competent on it will have less of a high win rate. People like William Benson and Tom here have ridiculous 80-90% win rates on their personal Cabal lists. Struggling into Inhumans though, which shows that potentially in that straight fight they're going to lose out because their pieces are a little bit squishier. They don't really have the defensive tech to back it up. Why often you see Recal come in as one of their main defensive tools. And Tom is a big fan of survival as well. I know that because he wants to be able to keep his Baron Zemo alive after dazing and guarantee he gets those extra dice off. Number 4, looking at Inhumans. Now, this has been a couple of teams' worst matchups, and I really think the strength of this list at the moment is just being able to put Thor in the right place at the right time super early. You can either do a play where you're flipping Thor off of Medusa in the first turn, or you can open with Lockjaw placing Thor. But either way, keeping that Inhumans affiliation, you can put Thor right where he wants to be and give him that extra power off of Black Bolt, meaning you've got a 3-power Thor on the midline from turn 1, which is a very, very fast attrition start. Again, they're a team that sort of struggles with that defensive a little bit, and Molfar, one of the top Inhumans players, and again, somebody that went 5-1 at WTC, actually brings Odin's Blessings with the Asgard pivot to have Odin and Loki. And I imagine that's potentially bringing in Crimson Dynamo to go against enemy Asgard and control those triggers, control the damage coming in. So very interesting list there. 58% win rate at the moment from Inhumans. Going into our top 3, guys, if you haven't put in a top 3, put them into the comments. What do you think the top 3 lists are? Number 3 is Hellfire Club, which I imagine would have been a lot of people's assumed number 1. They play chess basically unlike any other affiliation. They always have the power to do what they want to do. They're going to be where they want to be. And this list was taken from the Mind Transfer guy himself, another good friend of mine, Jamie, who runs Mind Transfer to try and mess with you and punish you taking grunts or punish you activating in the wrong order, and punish these slight misposition plays, which is a really cool skill expression in Hellfire Club, which we haven't seen too much of. And then also brings Malekith Kingpin, because you get this really nice answer to Asgard and Researcher with Malekith, Kingpin, and Emma, because you have Kingpin to be collision immune, and then you have Emma for Mind Transfer and Malekith for some damage. Generally, though, Hellfire Club want to be playing on these wide maps and they want to be throwing people off. Their worst matchup is again Inhumans. It's a matchup that a lot of these top meta lists struggle with. The number 2 affiliation at the moment is Asgard, and we're looking at just Bill, Thor, and Loki. I'm sure we've all had the chance to play up against this and feel how oppressive the attrition can feel. This list was taken from Cathal, who I think has got the most reps of Asgard of anyone in their current form. And what I really wanted to ask him and pick his brain out was, does he take Researcher? Does he take Brothers in Arms? What defensive tech does he take? And he, I guess, feels that Recal and Odin's Blessing is enough, plus the patch up to fix up your big tanky boys, and then just getting off that Brothers in Arms play. Every now and then, something like a good Doom's Prophecy will, run the game for you. If you can get that onto a Scourge or onto a Lady Sif after they've dazed, it can be an incredible amount of dice. So just having that heavy weight of dice, and is definitely one of the big monsters in the meta at the moment. And the last top list, the number 1 list of 2024, is Namor Invaders. This list is just incredibly powerful. It's very, very consistent. It's very defensively strong, and I think it's really bringing this this powerful bunker. But you're using tools like Zemo and Namor. You have these long movers that can go out, get the extracts, deal some damage, and get back. And I think that's just incredibly powerful. Stacking those reroll bubbles. This is something that if you're trying to build a list and you're trying to build it competitively, one of the big archetypes you can lean into is getting those reroll bubbles set up, either using Web Warrior Carriers or using the Namor Invaders strategy to get 2-3 rerolls in your little defensive bubble. The impressive 62 win rate there was very, very good. Their worst matchup, interestingly, is Apocalypse, and I think that's largely because of that ability to hand out a ton of conditions, a ton of very, very relevant conditions in a big AoE. So what does this mean overall? I've broken this down into 3 main archetypes. You've got the top archetype at the moment is the tanky scoring lists, things like Namor, things like Hellfire, that have a really good use of extract steals, throws to win points, and tanking tools. They want to try and win, or at least be definitively ahead on turn 3 or 4, potentially closing on turn 5. These, potentially lower strength lists that you might want to try if you want to do some off-meta stuff, but still build this archetype. Potentially Guardians could build a little tanky scoring bubble, or Winter Guard as well, although you're struggling by taking a pretty poor quality leader. Kaiju Attrition is the second sort of big list that we're seeing. Things like anything that can run Thor 2 efficiently, the Red Skull 3 Thanos list, and Apocalypse, just bringing these big high amount of dice, or really efficient amounts of damage, trying to slow the scoring down, so trying to slow down what your opponent's doing, and closing out the game either turn 3 if they're doing a very fast attrition game plan like Cabal, or into turn 5 or 6 if they're a little bit more patient and they have that defensive tech to back it up. And then the weakest archetype, but still very strong overall, is that sort of turbo scoring, the ones that are trying to get out of the gate really fast and basically set up a win on turn 2 and score out on turn 3. So things like Storm to score, 7 points potentially on turn 1 on the right scenario. A similar thing with Mars and Wakanda. So again, if you want to sort of build out that archetype, potentially something like a Mystique Brotherhood on pay to flips, to be able to hang on to that extra power, just these wide scoring lists. Interestingly, some of the archetypes that we're not seeing represented at the moment are the wide attrition, which is on the rise with Weapon X, so that's one to look out for in the new year. And wide attrition again with sort of Guardians, I think are going to gain some footing into next year as well. So what does 2025 look like? What do I think it's going to look like? I've heard rumors that the new crisis will be bringing higher threat ranges. So that would be really interesting to see if we no longer have 15 threat researcher, but we're running 17 threat researcher, it's going to be a lot harder for teams to run 3 wide and control priority. So that could be a really interesting change, and potentially seeing the max threat that we get to play with go up to 22, 23. And that would mean that, these big powerful pieces like Thor 2 and Thanos will comprise a smaller amount of the actual list, and you might have more tools to deal with them within your list. I think new Inhumans character cards and potentially tactics cards and a second leader could be a massive, massive bombshell on the meta. It could really shake things up. They're already in a fantastic spot, and just getting more tools never hurts in affiliation. Inhumans have a solid leadership, have a really solid ability to splash, have some good pieces, but really lack on the tactics cards at the moment. So I think if we get a few relevant tactics cards, they're going to be very, very strong indeed. I think the Web Spider-Verse box is going to bring some much needed love to the Web Warriors. Again, I've heard rumors from the rumor mill of an affiliated 2-threat, which would be really, really cool to see them have a potential for an 8-threat core, being able to run, more of the same very wide game plan. It'd be really interesting to see what the new boxes that we're getting early 2025 will do. The Midnight Suns and the Guardians lists, things like Yondu and things like Elsa, see their impact with these sort of like range damage dealer builds. And then seeing Dormammu on the rise. Lots of rumors of a big errata coming, some rumors about him getting a bit of a rework, and he's already improving. There's a couple of people that are doing very, very well with Dormammu at the moment, so that'd be really interesting to see if he does get a little bit better. What his footprint on the meta is going to be then after that. And then also seeing this Weapon X build, this janky wild 9 wide at 20, or 8 wide at 20, whatever it is, have some success, I think is really interesting to watch. And just the idea of potentially you having 5 or 6 activations after your opponent is very, very cool. That's everything from me, guys. Thank you so much for listening and watching. I hope you have had a wonderful year, and I'm looking forward to playing with some of you in 2025. Do leave any thoughts for me in the comments. I'll have a read. I'll get back to you. And if you want to hear more straight from these people, let me know, and I'll try and set up some interviews. Thanks, guys.